All right, good afternoon, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. Actually, it's probably still morning for a lot of people. Good morning, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So in this video, we are going to be talking about how it is that you can survive in this economy by understanding the correct economic theory that makes the most sense. Now, for me, studying the economy from a working class point of view has given me the ability to make some what I feel is the most appropriate decisions for myself that has carried me from being in a very low place in my life when I had turned 40 years old to now what I feel is on the upward moving path to where I am going to be a successful person, or at least in my opinion, what would be a successful person. To put it in a nutshell, understanding the economy for yourself is the only way to understand how to survive and thrive within this economy. Now, I have developed over the years my own economic theory. A lot of times I'll refer to it as the credible threat theory, but ultimately everybody has to internalize the information for themselves and then recognize where it is that they are within the economy. Now, a lot of people ask me, where is it that I go? And I'm thinking to myself, well, are you 18 trying to figure out how to get started? Or are you 80 trying to figure out how to hold on to everything that you have earned? These are two completely different strategies, but yet this is all occurring on the same day. So taking it in for yourself, understanding it for yourself. Let me turn my Wi-Fi off here real quick, guys. Okay, that's going to be better. Sorry, guys, I have my Wi-Fi on there. Sometimes it has a hard time connecting to the house. So let's break this down in a way that we can understand it for ourselves. So us as a working class individual can internalize this information and then be making those good, appropriate decisions based on the information that we have gathered and that we have internalized. So now when I think about some of the things that are being stated out there in the mainstream media, I think a lot of the times I had grown up, I have been told through many different places that the media is propaganda. Now, this isn't new. This is something that has been going on my entire life. Like, I'm almost 50 years old. I'm 49. I just turned 49 years old. This has been going on the entire time, and yet this is the main place that everybody seems to get information. They very rarely go and do the research for themselves, studying the documents, go and reading the, papers, go and doing the research. They listen to other people out there who are essentially regurgitating all the information that they have heard from everybody else who is regurgitating the same information that was delivered to them. And they don't know if they are spitting out truth or not, just because it becomes the common narrative. It almost becomes common belief. So many people start saying it. Now, when you're willing to push against that, when you're willing to say, yeah, I don't care if that's what every single person believes, that doesn't make, that doesn't change my belief in what I have researched and what I understand and what I have communicated through what channels that I have developed the conversations with. What we are looking at and what we are thinking about is different from all that. It's like it's not even the same thing. And so I think, okay, well, the majority of the people are suffering and pain and wondering why it is that they have a hard time making it through this world. And then they say, well, I saw it on the news. And I'm like, well, there it is, right? I mean, bang. I stopped really watching the news and stopped paying attention to the information that was being pushed through the news unless it was going to unless I could use it to confirm the information that I was using, right? And so when I think about the news and I think about how it is that the credible threat theory that I have developed by studying the speeches and the documents and everything that I have from the Federal Reserve itself, and then I go to the news articles out there, I say, yes, look, here it is. This is how they're doing it. This is how they're using their words against you. This is how they're pushing these particular theories. Here it is again. I'm actually pinpointing and showing the propaganda, right? Now, it doesn't mean that they are not putting out facts, right? Like, they could be putting out facts. That's not like, something that I'm trying to argue against. Like, they can put out the real information, but the meaning that they put behind it is definitely a manipulative one, right? It's definitely in the way of gaslighting. And by gaslighting you, they can control the way that you feel about the economy. So let's understand what it is that's happening with monetary policy right now that gives the power not only to the Federal Reserve, but also to the powers that are essentially the most important parts to the economy. Now, you think about it, we have been told we are a consumer-based economy, right? I don't like the idea behind it. And again, like economic theories that are out there, most of them are trying to say the way it could be or should be or something of that nature. That's not what I do. I just try to see it the way it is. And we used to be a manufacturing economy. Like a consumer-based economy is different from a manufacturing-based economy. When you're a manufacturer, you produce and save. When you're a consumer, you go into debt and you buy stuff. So these are two completely different economies. But what was at the heart of it? Transactions, right? Ultimately doing transactions. If you are producing the product that is sold, which way does the money flow? Right? It flows to you. You produce stuff that sells. You produce stuff that sells. Selling gives you money. Money gives you savings. If you get money, money is savings. Savings is producing a strong economy, right? Simple as that. Produce, save, strong economy. But now when you go the other way and you consumer debt, well, now you go into debt. Now you gotta, work hard to pay back the debt plus interest to consume. But the transaction still happened. But which way did the money flow? All right. So you borrowed money, and then that money flowed through the consumer product, and where? To the manufacturer of that consumer product, which was the foreigner now. So this is the unfortunate situation from being a manufacturing-based economy that produces and saves to a consumer-based economy, debt-based economy that goes into debt slavery and purchasing of foreign products. Right? Completely different. So now we have to think about that. We are not surviving or attempting to survive in an economy that had producer savers. See, this is why most people are thinking, okay, how come my job doesn't really cut it anymore? How come it's so difficult to earn a wage and that wage to try and make it in this world? And it was just like, okay, so now let's just step it back a little bit and think about when we were a producer saver. That's a strong economy. But we're not producer savers. So you want to be a producer saver, but we're not in a producer saver. So we're thinking, okay, we want to survive in this environment, but that's not the environment that exists. So now we want to try and vote for people to create this sort of environment. But that's not the environment. It's just simply not it. Like, it's a sunny day today. If it was raining, it wouldn't be a sunny day. It's not the environment. Right? And so we have to think, okay, what kind of environment are we in? Well, we're in a debtor-based economy, right? A debt-based, consumer-based economy. Okay, so understanding that this is going to create a whole different sort of monetary policy than the one that is going to be most approving for us, who are wannabe savers, producers, strong middle class, strong economy, that sort of behavior. But that's not the environment we're in. So we're going to vote for people who can create that environment, but that's not it, right? So what are you going to do? You're going to be very frustrated, and then you're going to blame. Wow, if it wasn't for them and they're in the, and they had done all this, then, it wouldn't look like this. And then a whole other group of people will look at it and say, well, your behavior on what you're doing right now is going to create a worse time, right? So it's like this argument that is taking place over there that will never create any kind of thing that is going to be helpful or helpful or useful to you. So now we think, okay, we're a debtor-based economy, debtor consumer-based, and we can just eliminate the whole idea of, of being a strong, producer, saver economy or whatever, because that's just not it. And you can try and force the situation, but it doesn't matter. It's a sunny day. It's not a raining day. So we have to be in the sunny day. Now, when you're on the idea of a debtor-based economy, this one is very difficult to really wrap your head around being a good economy, because it's essentially not. If you are a working class individual who wants to show up every day, work hard, not even like go and buy into a bunch of luxury experiences, just buy a modest vehicle so that you can raise a nice family in a good neighborhood and just have this like something very simple in your life like that, right? And think, okay, how come that's so difficult? Why is that hard? Here's a better one. I love it when people say this. Why did they make it hard? Right? Why did they do this? And now I'm thinking, well, did they do this? Right? Because we used to be this strong producer saver nation, And that's the one you're thinking about when you have that job that's going to do the things that you're wishing it to do. But that's not the one we live in, right? Because we're setting that aside now. So we have to think, okay, so you're not going to be able to have that job and think, okay, this job is going to be able to produce and save me into the ability to have this house. No, you got to take out debt. You got to be a debt slave in order to get this house. And that's a very difficult thing to now do, because the ability to get the debt is now become too hard for the average job. See, there used to be, it wasn't that hard when we stepped out of the producer saver to get a loan for a house, right? As long as you had a job, you got the loan. But now, even if you have the job, it doesn't pay enough to get the loan with the high interest rates. So now even the good job sucks. It doesn't get you into the house. Right? And this is the unfortunate circumstances of being in the debtor consumer nation of economy. You're just going to go deeper and deeper into this, and it's going to be more and more difficult and only accessible to those who can actually get the debt, right? Borrow the money or have the money, essentially the rich, right? Okay, so understanding that this is what we're going to be in, how do you survive in this sort of environment? Well, you got to understand it from a very early age that this is what you are going to face, right? From the times that you are 18 years old, the day that you get your first job, or when sometime in your 20s when you graduated college, you're going to have to understand that this is the unfortunate circumstances that you are now facing. And if you are going to set yourself up in a debt slavery right off the bat when you go into college, then you are going to have to deal with that for a very long time, because there are so many people that I look out there who have this student loan debt that is piling up and getting worse. And I think to myself, yeah, those are the people who didn't get a return on their investment, right? So from the very earliest age, you have to think, I need to get a return on my investment, which means that if I am going to buy college, if I'm going to take out the student loan debt, I'm going to have to work incredibly hard to not only pay back that debt, but, make sure that my skills are worth it, right? To make sure that I'm studying in something that is going to actually pay it back. And so now this is how a lot of people end up having to operate when you go into like the survival mode and within this economy, is that, man, they're desperate. I need to take out the student loan debt. I need to get this good job. And then they go and take out the student loan debt, and they end up working down at the hardware store just like everybody else is doing, because they're swimming in a sea of everybody else who has degrees, and it doesn't make them any kind of special. So here's the unfortunate circumstances of having put themselves into debt. But this is ultimately the problem that we face within the consumer debtor-based economy, right? Is that if you don't do it, look how horrible your life is. I'm not going to have a nice car. I'm not going to have a good career. I'm not going to have a nice house. I'm not going to have all these things that you need access to debt to get. See, there used to be a time when you can have a job and acquire these things. But now you need access to debt in order to get these things, because we're a debt-based economy. It's so easy to see it this way and then not blame politicians for not bringing us back to a situation in which the common everyday job would be enough. We know it can't be. Like when I come to that realization that there is nothing that anybody could do to make my job any better. Like, that's it. Like, no matter how much, how easy, less taxes, like whatever, it doesn't matter. It didn't matter how much or how little I made. It didn't matter, right? It wasn't enough. It was never enough. Never, ever, ever was it enough. And so knowing that it wasn't enough, and knowing that I had to figure out how to do something different, it was to understand, it was just like, well, maybe being in debt isn't the greatest thing in the world. Right? Everybody says it, but yet everybody does it. Student debt, car debt, house debt, credit card debt, debt, all this debt. And so I look out there at people who are complaining and frustrated like I was doing. I was thinking, well, I did that when I was in debt. Debt separates you from everybody else. All right? Now, it doesn't separate you from everybody else because everybody else is in it, but then you think about how it is that some people are so good at being here in this economy and kicking ass, and it sucks for me. And I'm thinking, well, do you ever think about how they operate inside of debt? What they are using their debt for? See, your working class job back in the day, which was producer, manufacturer, that we had to set aside because it just doesn't exist anymore, now has debt issuance taking place. With this debt issuance, what is going to happen? New money, right? Debt is new money. In fact, inflation, the definition of inflation is the expansion of debt and money. Debt and credit, money and credit. The prices are the results of that expansion of debt and credit, or money and credit. So inflation is really just the expansion of debt and money. Prices ends up being the results of that. What you do with the debt now has you on the one side or the other of the wedge. See, it doesn't matter about your job. I mean, your job is important, don't get me wrong. I mean, I have a working class job. I go 9 to 5. I do everything just like everybody else does. I got the 401k and the, everything else, right? I mean, I show up every day at a hardware store. So I'm just in the same boat as everybody else. But I think about what it is that I do with my money and how it is that I'm operating and paying attention to what it is that I'm taking out in debt, because ultimately I don't want any debt at all. I don't have car debt right now. Like, I had to pay off Sarah's car because the transmission blew on it. So now I pay off her car. I have other running vehicles. I'm good. Like, to me, I don't need a car loan. I don't need a car. I mean, I would love a car. Like, I'm going to go get a new car. I'm going to get one for Sarah, especially one that's going to, come into winter or something like that. I'm going to end up getting her another vehicle, something that is, more up to date or whatever. And I'm going to give one of my vehicles away. Now, I have a plan for that. I'm setting that into motion right now. I have built up the funds for it. I'm doing all the things that are appropriate for buying into one of these things, although it is buying into a luxurious experience by buying into a newer car. I'm not going to go get a brand new car, right? I mean, that's just all there is to it. So I know what it is that I am paying attention to and how it is that I'm using this debt, or if I am going to use debt, how it is that I am going to access that debt. This is strategic in my planning of it. It's not just doing it willy-nilly or running it to the very end. Like, I don't live paycheck to paycheck. In fact, I can pay my bills on time, and I could probably just go buy whatever car I wanted because I have the ability to do it. But that's not the point of it. The point is that making proper decisions in a debt-based, consumer-based economy is what's ultimately going to lead you in the right direction. I mean, this is really it. When it comes down, like, one of the biggest things that people can look at is buying cars. Buying cars is probably one of the fastest way to separate yourself from the rich. You look rich by driving it, but you are far from it, right? I mean, I look out there and I'm thinking, man, I think I do fairly well for bringing in income and keeping my expenses low. And I don't understand how it is that everybody around me drives nicer cars than me. Like, literally everybody drives a nicer car than I do. And I think to myself, how is it that only people afford this? Like, you must everybody, 100% live paycheck to paycheck. And that sucks. I lived that way my entire life. And I can tell you the stress and anxiety and frustration and pissed offness of, like, just the random things that are out there because, really this stuff is eating away at your subconscious because you're living paycheck to paycheck. That's a horrible existence. That is not being rich. But that's the way most people live in a consumer debt-based economy. So knowing, okay, well, maybe cars aren't the greatest idea in the world, right? Like, because this is where a lot of people who are poor end up dumping a lot of their money, and especially a huge amount of their paycheck goes into a new vehicle. Now, you look at what it is that the rich people are buying, right? Like, their portion of their wealth, their income, and their money that goes into a vehicle is almost insignificant. No matter what vehicle they drive, all right, what vehicle they have. But the portion of their money that goes into a vehicle almost doesn't even exist. Think about that for just a minute. The majority of poor people, right? People who earn the least amount in this country, who are bitching about how hard it is in this world, dump most of their money into a car, right? I mean, beyond the living expense, like, when you can put your money towards public transit, right, or a cheaper vehicle, or something of this nature, but instead put it towards an expensive car because of reliability, right? Then ultimately you are setting yourself up to remain in a position in which it will always be difficult, right? Because you'll never have an opportunity to be in the flow of money that will then give you the opportunity to do what the rich people are doing, and that is they're buying stocks. They're buying bonds. Better yet, they're investing into businesses, right? They put their money into business because that money has the biggest return of capital investment, right? You put it into a business that does well, you manage that business well, and this is where the money comes from. The vehicle is so insignificant in these people's life that it's almost like it might as well be like this cup of coffee right here, right? That's how insignificant it is in the rich people's life. But when you look at the poor people, it's the most significant thing, the biggest burden, the biggest weight that holds them down. Now, when you understand it in this fashion, you think about it in this fashion, and it's just like, okay, so really ultimately, because we have moved away from this producer-saver economy, which a good job would have been able to get me a nice truck, right, and a house, and, you know, all the food and all the experiences that I was hoping for, that doesn't exist. So now I have to do things much differently, which means that buying a vehicle is not part of my priorities. In fact, it's on the list of things that I should not do, right? Don't do unless, right? Unless you have met these particular criterias. Because if you buy into a vehicle and it's taken up a huge chunk of your expenses and it doesn't leave you any room to be nimble with your downturn in income or added expenses through surprise bills or something like that, because you're all paying most of it into a vehicle, then you're going to realize right there, that's how it makes you poor. Right there is how it makes you like look out there in the driveway and see, man, that's a beautiful car, right? Meanwhile, you can't pay a $50, you know, surprise bill that comes up. Can't come up with $400 in case of an emergency. That is far from rich, right? Like to be able to look out at a car lot and say, I could have any one of those, and then drive past the car lot in a 97 Suburban, being just as pleased that you're traveling as if you were in one of those other vehicles. So now understanding what it is that the rich people are doing and what it is that the poor people are doing is going to give you a much better idea on what it is that you need to survive. Because if you are going into consumer, right, if you are going to be a consumer, then you better be in a position in which that whatever it is that you're consuming is insignificant to you. If it's very important, like my house is very important, it's probably going to end up being a huge portion of your income, of your net wealth, your assets, of your expenses, whatever it is, just like most people are out there. But the more after that you spend into luxurious experiences like a car or fancy clothing or any of this other stuff, this is really what is causing the wedge between the rich and the poor. That added consumption that you are going into, either through just using up all your income, which leaves you with nothing at the end, or you're actually doing it worse by borrowing money to do it, putting it on a credit card or going and getting a loan for it or something of that nature. So now this is like not a way to survive. This is actually the opposite of surviving. Surviving is taking it back and saying, okay, now how do I get into the flow, get the money coming towards me, and then keep my expenses incredibly low so that I have extra money, like money beyond the money you already make. No, money beyond that of what it is that you need to survive. This extra money that is beyond your expenses can now be put towards something that is going to have a return on capital investment. That's what rich people do. Just saying. Poor people don't do that. Rich people do that. So if you want to survive in this economy, in a consumer debt-based economy, you have to think this way. You have to think, okay, well, I need to be in flow, right? I need to have money beyond that of my expenses. And I can't increase my expenses if I can't increase my income. If my income is here, my expenses are here, how am I going to get the flow? How am I going to get the money? Well, you got to lower the expenses. That's all there is to it. Or increase your income, right? There's only two paths to wealth. And earn more, require less. Right, pretty simple, right? You don't have to think about too hard. It's not that hard. Right? Earn more, require less. Okay, so once you learn how to earn more and require less, you have to take that earned more money and you have to take risk. Right? And not risk like you're going to drink a bunch at the bar and then try and drive home, because that's how most people end up wasting it. I'm talking about risk by putting it towards something that is going to have a return to it. Not like necessarily, I mean, a speculative asset like gold or Bitcoin or something like that might do it, but I'm thinking more in the way of saving it up and starting your own business. I don't know how many times I've heard of people who started a business with something so small. And like, I thought, to me, like, I can't believe that that built up to a huge business. Like, the story of a friend of mine who came into town with a vacuum cleaner and was just looking to make some money, and she offered to vacuum and clean and wash the windows of this lady's house, picked up a few more clients over time. She got some commercial clients. A few years later, she had this huge list of clients that she sold off for like $100,000. Like, literally sold off the list of all these people that, she was working for, sold it off to another cleaning company for $100,000, stepped away from it. I'm like, brilliant. So brilliant. Started with the vacuum cleaner, right? It doesn't, like, anybody can do anything if you put your mind to it, if you just think about it, and if you build it brick by brick, right? So if this is the mindset that you're in, then being a survivor is not necessarily the concept. It's thriving, right? This is really where you want to be. You don't want to survive. I mean, surviving is one thing, saying, hey, I can make a day to day, but that's like kind of breaking even, figuring out how it is that your paycheck is going to make it to your bills. That's surviving. Let's thrive. Let's thrive in this thing. And so understanding what it is just to thrive is not meaning having a good job. See, that's what it used to be. We got to set that aside, right? We set that part aside. Having a good job isn't going to get you the ability to thrive. It's not enough, right? In order to thrive, you have to be in flow, which means low expenses and high income, however you get that income. And your day job probably isn't going to be enough, right? I mean, your day job isn't enough to do it because your day job used to be enough. So we've moved out of that. Now everybody has access to credit, and you're going to compete against people who are borrowing money. So now, if you want to buy a car, you're like, hey, man, I want to work hard, earn the money to buy a car. And it was just like, well, everybody else who buys cars is borrowing money to do it. So now you have to compete against everybody else who is borrowing money, and you're going to have your day job compete against it. Good luck. It won't happen. And so now you can't buy a car because you're going to try and not take out debt to do it. See the problem with buying the car? Don't even worry about it anymore. Buying a car is not the right idea. What you want to do is buy dividend-paying stocks. You know why? Because dividend-paying stocks pay you back. Or real estate investment trust, or better yet, team up with somebody and buy real estate, like the physical house or rental property, and then have that property paying you, or at least paying back the investment that it can over time eventually start paying you. These are the mindsets and the ideas of which it is that you can do to thrive, because that's thriving in this economy. Not surviving. Surviving is just trying to break even. Thriving is when you actually get a return from what it is that you're doing with your money. Now that we understand this is the position in which that we have to move to, right? Cutting back on expenses is easy because now you're excited about actually deploying that money towards something that's going to have the return. And again, like, thinking about the day job, oh, whatever. I mean, day job, yeah, okay, that's enough to pay the bills, get the lights, get the insurance, and now I need to move on to something else. Let's get some other money going because the day job isn't going to be enough. It's enough to get you some income and, occupies 8 hours out of your day, right? You can kind of get some cool stuff out of it, 401k and health insurance and some of those other things if you're able to get the right job. But ultimately, it will never be enough to survive, right? I mean, maybe survive, but it will never be enough to thrive. Thriving comes from extra effort, extra time, extra whatever, right? Extra jobs, and and so getting that part, like, I know it's tough for a lot of people. They're like, man, I shouldn't have to bust my ass my entire life just to have a simple existence. You're right, you shouldn't, but some of us are going to do it, and you're going to have to suffer the consequences by not doing it, right? I mean, you're right, you shouldn't, but you know what? It's not fair. And so it's just like, it's not fair. And now that we understand that it's not fair and never gonna be, then yeah, you're right. It's, you shouldn't have to do it, but you're gonna have to. And if you don't do it, then, well, I'll see you way back there. I mean, I don't know what to do. There's the bucket of water. So let's talk about the what's going on right now, right? Actually, before I start breaking down what's going on right now, because I've babbled on for 30 minutes here about survival and thrival, let's go check out some of these super chats. We got, oops, let me get rid of these glasses. What is that, the Hermosillo? Hermosillo? All right, thanks for keeping us up to date on lumber, as this says a lot about the state of the economy. Yeah, you bet, man. I'll always keep you guys up to date on lumber when I see it happen. Sleaze Core Trick Bagger. I love that name. 101. Thanks for the $1.99. Should I take out loans and buy QQQ and Bitcoin? Yeah, that's all entirely up to you, man. You got to go out there and find whatever it is investment that's going to best suit you and what your needs are. That's another thing about investing is like, don't listen to other people out there. I mean, you can listen to other people and give their suggestion, but go and do the research yourself. Right? Because here's the thing. If a guy comes out here and says, "Oh man, I got you the next stock. Here, buy this stock." And you buy it, you're going to have to listen to him on when to sell it, right? Because you didn't know why you bought it in the first place. You bought it because some dude said it, and then now you got to listen to some dude tell you when to sell it. Okay? And that's very difficult to really own it for yourself if that's the strategy that you're taking. $5 from the Hermoso. Oh, good Lord. You know what I'm trying to say. All right, you want to be rich? Learn to work hard and save and build your skills to fix your own cars and houses. Cash flow. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like everybody has taken on their different tactics and able to do this, right? Like how it is that some people are able to get extra money, like, the money beyond the money they're already making. But, for some people, it's a matter of like, finding stuff to sell on the internet. Like that's the way they do it. They just find other things out there they get for cheap and turn around and sell it on the internet and make some money doing that. So everybody has to be creative in what it is they're doing. Like the lady with the vacuum cleaner. I mean, some people have construction skills. They can easily, pick up side work doing construction, either doing, working for somebody else or even just doing side jobs for other people on the weekend. There's all kinds of things that people could do for that extra money. It's the time that a lot of, I guess what it comes down to is a lot of times people are taking, they're lounging, sitting, not doing anything productive, right, with their time. And this is the majority of people most of the time, like unless they're actively at work. And understanding that there is so many hours in a day in which that you can be productive. And most of the time, even if it's something that isn't necessarily monetarily productive, it's still very productive in the eyes of networking, of, putting out the energy of return, like volunteering, stuff like that. Like this is how it is that you actually put yourself in the energy of flow that comes towards you. It's because if you're constantly productive, if you're constantly being useful, if helpful, then it's almost as if there's like no other choice but to get a return from that. All right. Let's talk about monetary policy for a little bit since we're half hour into this video now. One of the things that I see happening right now is a lot of the credible threat of tariffs. Like, yet I work at a retail facility, and although the credible threat of tariffs is quite pronounced in every different direction that you can look at, I have not seen the evidence of it. Right? Like, increased prices, that's going to cause, like all these tariffs is going to cause all this massive increase in prices. Now, I have, like, heard of a particular company that's going to increase all their products and all the prices and everything, and like they've announced it, like this is coming, but it hasn't happened yet. Okay? And now this is something that I find very interesting is because this seems to be the case with a lot of things, right? The announcements, the ideas, the belief, the actual attempts to deal with a problem that hasn't presented itself yet. It's going to, right? But yet it's not here. It's like saying, okay, we're about ready to get hit with a bunch of, wind and rain, but it's sunny right now, right? So it hasn't happened as of yet. So what's occurring right now is something that is not what it is that people believe is going to happen, right? Because it still can happen, but it's something much different. Okay, now what is happening is that we have a low inflation readings. Now, whether you want to believe it or not, doesn't matter, isn't true anyway. FASB 56, we've talked about this a million times. I very rarely talk about the numbers like inflation and stuff like that. The direction, where it is, right? This is left up to a lot of debate. Leave it up to Trump, leave it up to the Fed. Both of them are saying that the inflation is low, right? It's coming in between 2 and 3%, whatever metric you want to read. Now, the reality might be different, and I agree that, they fudge the numbers or even falsify them altogether, sure. Right? But this is what they are saying. The inflation numbers are coming in between 2 and 3%. Now, the inflation expectation is incredibly elevated, right, through the credible threat of tariffs. This is creating an environment within the economy that is quite unique for those who are rich, right? And it's a big problem for those who are poor. So now, as we think about what it is that's taken place, is because this elevated inflation and the inflation expectation was something that I had almost, well, not so much the inflation, but the inflation expectation. I almost predicted this in a sense that if they could keep the inflation going, is what I had said a long time ago, right? I didn't know it was going to look like this, and so I can't say that I predicted tariffs and I predicted all that. That's not what I'm getting at all. But I did have the belief that they were going to want and hold for an extended period of time inflation expectations, whether it was through propagandized media or the actual deliberate severing of supply chains or keeping the supply chains broken. This is part of the monetary policy. And now I know a lot of people would say, no, this couldn't possibly be part of the monetary policy. They wouldn't want the monetary policy to have inflation elevated. That is absolutely incorrect. They definitely want elevated inflation. They want elevated inflation expectations, and they want it to remain elevated for a significant amount of time. That is absolutely the case. Now, I know that's pushing against 99% of what it is that people say out there in the mainstream media. I do not care if I'm pushing against 99% of the propagandized information out there, because that stuff isn't true. It isn't real. It's not based in reality. It's not based in facts. It's not based in anything that is remotely close to the reality of the monetary policy. The monetary policy, I have proven it many times through their own words, documents, statements, and even just recently through the report to Congress, that the Federal Reserve's monetary policy is seeking to achieve inflation moderately above 2% for some time. Knowing that to be the case since 2018, all the stuff that people were talking about as far as inflation, hyperinflation, destroying the monetary policy, destroying the Fed, destroying all this other stuff, and I thought to myself, do you not realize this elevated inflation expectation and the severing of the supply chain, creating an inflationary scenario through the supply-demand imbalance, is absolutely saving the Federal Reserve? Most people have no idea that's what's going on. None, right? And by not understanding that this is what's saving the Federal Reserve, they continue to push the ability for the Federal Reserve to conduct themselves the way they are, and that is with an elevated interest rate, elevated Fed funds rate, elevated inflation expectation, and ultimately all in the name of raising the neutral interest rate, which was the main problem the Federal Reserve was facing prior to COVID. Now, I've said this stuff over and over again, and I know it's super confusing for a lot of people to try and internalize this, because I'm the only one who's really describing it this way. Everybody else is saying the Fed screwed up, they don't know what they're doing, that Jerome Powell was the blame. That's the best one. Like, I have never seen a more misinformed public than to listen to Donald Trump blame Jerome Powell for anything. And then even worse, having all these damn news economists who are all super famous sit around and debate and pick their nose about how bad Powell is at his job. It is just the most ridiculous set. I don't even want to discuss it. It's just adding more power to them. The Federal Reserve was facing the consequences of a failed monetary policy in 2018 when the Fed funds rate was close to the lower bound of zero. Now, understanding that the Fed funds rate and the adjustment of the Fed funds rate was the main policy tool coming from the Federal Reserve, that had come to an end. They couldn't adjust interest rates down because the lower bound of zero means zero interest rates. That's it. They were stuck. Boom. That's it. And so knowing that there is something else out there called a neutral interest rate, and that neutral interest rate is the Fed's funds rate neither accommodating nor restricting the economy. They don't set the rate. That's important to understand. The Federal Reserve doesn't set the rate. The government doesn't set the rate. The banking system doesn't set the neutral interest rate. The neutral interest rate is just an existing rate. When over time, that neutral interest rate can move, right? Based on what's going on within the economy, based on inflation, based on, economic activity, whatever is going on out there, the neutral interest rate can move. But it's when the Fed is neither accommodating nor restricting the economy. It's like, you can be flying down the highway at 50 miles an hour and pop the car into neutral, right? It's kind of the same thing, right? And so when the Fed is at neutral, it doesn't matter what's going on out there. They're not adding any power and they're not restricting the vehicle. It's just coasting, right? And so now the neutral interest rate rises on the inflation expectation. Now, when you think about inflation expectation pulling the neutral interest rate higher, why would that happen? Why would inflation expectation pull a neutral interest rate higher? Just think about it. If you have inflation expectation locked in stone, hyperinflation, money printer go burr, prices go up, guaranteed to happen, what would you do? What are you going to do? Are you going to sit there and hoard on to all these dollars and say, man, I'm going to hoard on to all these dollars and keep them for myself and pretend like inflation doesn't exist? Of course not. You're going to behave as if inflation is taking place. So what are you going to end up doing, right? You're going to run out there and you're going to end up asking a higher return on your investment. So if you're going to take these dollars that you have hoarded and you're going to hand them over to somebody, you're going to say, I want higher rates. I want bigger return on my capital investment because we got all this here inflation and stuff, and I'm going to get a return on this. It needs to beat inflation, so give me a higher return on interest rates. Okay? So that's what ends up happening out there. People expect to pay a higher interest rate on their loans too because of these higher interest rates that are moving up to beat inflation. On top of that, right? What else are you going to do? You're going to be paying a higher price because you expect it. So not only do prices move up because you're expecting to pay a higher price, but then you also demand a higher return on your capital investments. And all this starts to pull the neutral interest rate higher. The longer it goes on, the further the neutral interest rate will climb. Now, understand that to be the case. Just internalize that for just a minute. If we have to sit there and think about it, cool. But the Federal Reserve was at the lower bound of zero. The neutral interest rate was also very close to zero. No more downward adjustment in the Fed funds rate was allowed to exist within the monetary policy. It wasn't even allowed to exist. They could have gone into negative territory, but there was no real evidence that going into negative territory could actually stimulate the economy, right? I mean, just think about all the countries that have gone into negative rates. It's not like they have done very well. Okay, so being at the lower bound of zero with a low neutral interest rate environment and knowing that was the problem, right? And again, this isn't me saying this. Is like, you can go and look it up for yourself. Monetary policy strategies for a low neutral interest rate world, given November of 2018 by John Williams. It's a great speech, talks all about it. Right? Now, understanding that the Fed was operating at that lower bound of zero with the low neutral interest rate and the low Fed funds rate and no more room for monetary adjustment through the Fed funds rate, they did have an effective tool. It was called forward guidance. They promised to keep interest rate extra low, extra long for an extended period of time, just very much like they did after COVID, or during COVID, really. And so this promise to keep extra low, extra long for an extended period of time creates the inflationary scenario or inflation expectations. Money printer go burr, prices go up. What else do you need to know? Well, I mean, other than that saves the Fed's ass, it doesn't necessarily describe what was taking place during quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4, which took the Fed's balance sheet of $850 billion to over $4.5 trillion. Right? I mean, this expansion of the balance sheet of $850 billion to over $4.5 trillion failed to produce an inflationary scenario for the Federal Reserve. So money printer go burr, prices go up. Well, explain that. Explain how the Federal Reserve was failing in 2018, even though they expanded the balance sheet by, 4 times better, almost 5 times. And all these people who are just like, dude, you know nothing about the Fed, money printer go burr, prices go up, cannot explain that. The reason why it didn't go up is because most of it ended up on the big bank's balance sheet, and unless that money was lent into the system, it didn't actually chase goods and services. See, what we had here during COVID was a supply chain breakdown because everybody was told to stay home, don't produce, don't ship, don't work. Here's a stimulus check. Go out there and spend all that money and clear out the shelves. What happens when you clear out the shelves and you have no distribution happening? Supply-demand imbalances. Prices move up. That's what caused inflation. Now, everybody wanted to say money printer? Fine. That saves the Fed. But what they really did is they severed the supply chain, created the supply-demand imbalances, and created the inflationary scenario through that manner. And then kept the inflation expectations elevated by saying we're going to keep it extra low, extra long for an extended period of time until the job is done, right? And then all this inflation started ripping in. People are saying, man, they can't maintain their target. And I'm thinking, well, you do realize in August of 2020, they changed how they look at inflation. Like, they don't go for a 2% inflation target anymore. They go for a 2% average inflation rate over time. And therefore, following periods when inflation has been running under 2%, appropriate monetary policy will likely aim to achieve inflation moderately above 2% for some time. Now, that change to monetary policy was completely ignored by everybody, except the uneducated economist who doesn't let stuff go. And since I bring that up over and over and over again, we are literally a minority of people, like just an insignificant, tiny little bit of people who actually know that's the reality of the monetary policy, right? Everybody else thinks that the Federal Reserve is going for a 2% target because, well, it's just simply easier that way. And then on top of it, they blame Jerome Powell for not achieving it, which, again, is completely so distracted from the reality of the situation that you'll never be able to see it or thrive in that situation. In fact, you'll have a difficult time even surviving. So now understand that the Federal Reserve is definitely, absolutely, definitely going for moderately above 2% for some time in order to achieve an average inflation rate over time. And it's not even average inflation over time. The technical term is asymmetric flexible average inflation targeting, if you want to look it up, right? I'll say it again, asymmetric flexible average inflation targeting, AFAIT. Yeah. AFAIT. All right, so that is the real monetary policy coming from the Fed, which doesn't go for a 2% target, but goes for average inflation rate over time, which means that appropriate monetary policy is likely to achieve inflation moderately above 2% for some time. That is the current situation we are now sitting in. It's the one that they were looking for, and that is the one that we should be thinking about. Not the one that they could be in, should be in, want to be in, whatever. This is the one that they are wanting. Because this is what they said 5 years ago in their consensus statement. Now, I don't know who else is talking about that besides the uneducated economist. But again, I'm not going to let it go until the new consensus statement comes out in the next few weeks or months or whenever it happens, because it's going to be happening very soon. And I'm going to look for that change. Now, knowing that the Federal Open Market Committee has this strategy, it's called the consensus statement, the statement on long-run policy, long-run goals and monetary policy strategies, right? Otherwise known as the consensus statement. The 12 voting members do their damnedest to achieve that strategy. Whether or not they have the same opinion on what it takes to achieve that strategy, that is what they are going for. All this hoopla about what it is that Jerome Powell is wanting for monetary policy is completely delusional, fabricated information, not even information, it is just artistic fantasies pulled from pure imagination. Right? Understanding that the FOMC is 12 voting members, 5 alternates, and 2 advisors who make up the monetary policy. They have a strategy called the consensus statement. The 12 of them, 5 alternatives, 2 advisors, do their best to form the opinions that they need to achieve that goal. They don't have their own goal in mind. Like, they might have their own opinion, they have their own beliefs, have their own political thoughts, they have all that other stuff, but ultimately they are the Federal Reserve who has this goal in mind, a strategy formed together. They go through the channels that they need to vote for in order to achieve that goal. Right? That's what the Fed is doing. Not Jerome Powell, right? Jerome Powell doesn't make up things on the fly saying, well, I think it should be strategized. I changed my strategy, right? No, he can't do that. Like, I mean, he can change his opinion, his vote, his belief, but ultimately his job is to do the best that he can to achieve that consensus statement strategy. That's it. Okay? Now, understanding that gives you a whole lot better understanding of what's going on with the economy, because if you want to blame it on politics, if you want to blame Trump, if you want to blame Powell, if you want to, talk about how it is that Kugler resigning and a new Fed official is coming in is going to change everything about the way it's being conducted, then you're going to miss it all. You're going to miss 100% of it. I mean, I don't know how else to explain it, but that's what's going to end up happening to it, because you can't see the real monetary policy that has been in play for over 5 years. Surviving and thriving, you can't survive when you're looking at something that is essentially completely superficial. It doesn't have anything to do with monetary policy. It doesn't have, anything to do with how it is that you can conduct yourself. It is a complete waste of time, and does nothing more than add the power to the political movement of whatever it is that they need to persuade you to be. It's literally like guiding sheep. Right? So now, if we think about it in a different fashion, it's just like, okay, so maybe for a while, they were attempting to go for inflation because they said they were. And that they were attempting to get average inflation rate over time of 2%, which also means that they had to lock in long-term inflation expectations at 2%. How many people believe that they're going for a 2% target? Like everybody. That is locking the expectations in on a long-term 2%. Because everybody believes that's what they're going for. If they had gone out there and says, hey, we're going to let inflation run extra hot, extra long for an extended period of time to make up for the fact that we failed to achieve the 2% target over the last... Do you think people would accept that? Of course not. They would lose their mind. They would be like, the Fed is causing inflation on purpose, right? Which they already said, but they didn't know why. They said that they were causing inflation on purpose and didn't mean to. They were causing inflation on purpose and meant to. That's the thing. Like Jerome Powell even said it in his speech, August 20th of 2020, or August 27th of 2020? I can't remember the date of the speech. August of 2020, anyway. I mean, he said it in the speech. He said that they were, inflation is most damaging to low-income households. However, right, the problem that they would face would be far worse without it. Like, he said it in August of 2020 that they were going to create an inflationary scenario. Take advantage of an inflationary scenario. One that hadn't existed yet. Like, maybe some people could predict it as well as they did, but they had plans for it. See, it was called the make-up strategy. They already knew that they were going to be letting inflation run extra hot, extra long for an extended period of time, and they had a whole strategy planned around it. COVID kind of made it irrelevant, but it didn't matter. The strategy was still in play. All right? Like, just because you didn't have to deploy the tools to make the strategy work because COVID essentially was taking care of business, didn't mean that they didn't want it. They wanted inflation. They wanted to raise the neutral interest rate, and they wanted to get that inflation expectation to remain elevated for a significant amount of time. So now that we're here and we have the neutral interest rate rising, it moves ever closer to the Fed funds rate. Well, this is awesome for the economy, because the economy becomes far less restricted. right? As the neutral interest rate moves closer to the Fed funds rate, the Fed funds rate being, or the neutral interest rate is when the Fed is neither accommodating nor restricting the economy. If the neutral interest rate is rising on the inflation expectations and the elevated inflation because of tariffs or all the concerns behind it, the neutral interest rate continues to rise. It's making the economy far less restricted than anybody had ever thought it was. But here's the problem, it's far less restricted for the people at the top, the people who have first access to the money. It's far less restricted for them. See, here, the working class people, we have to wait for it to all funnel down into our service jobs. And the manufacturing jobs we have, they're not enough. They're not enough to get first access to that money. So as we're sitting around waiting for that money to filter into through the consuming of products that we purchase from foreigners to sell to each other, and we're waiting for that money to come to us, it's too late. All the stuff that it has happened within the economy has already taken place. We have last access to that money, and it doesn't buy us anything to advance us. See, this is the Cantillon effect. It's in full swing right now. Like Cantillon effect in full swing. Unless you have first access to the money, which is essentially the debt issuance, and then you take that new money and you deploy it into a way that is going to have a return, like good debt, meaning buying rental properties or something of that nature, then the first access to the money generally puts the people on the bottom side of the wedge, because what they do with it is they go and buy a luxurious experience. And this is what's really creating the major inequality that we now face today. You want to survive and thrive, understand that the debt issuance and the new money and how it comes in is going to separate the rich from the poor. If you use that new money to buy a luxurious experience and you didn't earn that money, but you borrowed it to get there, and you're going to take time out of the future in order to pay for it back, you will most likely be on the bottom side of the wedge for it. On the flip side, if you take that money and you buy something that is going to have a return on the capital, meaning you deploy it towards something that a business of some sort, and you get to pay that money back, and then you get a return on all that business, that's generally going to put you on the top side of the wedge. These are the difference between survival and thrival. Thrival, survival and thriving. Thrival, is that a word? All right. Anything can raise by pumping more money into the economy. We are paying for it now with trash high prices. Resilience of the market has come at a cost. The personal antidote to the Cantillon effect is position yourself in the flow of currency, delay gratification while purchasing assets. Absolutely, all-nighter. I mean, essentially, if you have, like Cantillon says, there is going to be a group of people out there who postpone buying into, like, here, let me just read what he says. Because this is a good one. Like, anybody who has not purchased the Cantillon essay on economic theory really needs to go down into the link of the description of this video, click on the Amazon affiliate link, go and learn how to spell Cantillon essay, and then Google that and find it on Mises Institute for free. You can get the PDF for free. However, if you do buy the Cantillon essay off of the Amazon affiliate link, I will get a little commission. Even if you buy anything off of Amazon after clicking on that Amazon affiliate link, I will also get a commission for. So anything you want to buy off of Amazon, just click on that Amazon affiliate link first, and I'll get a little commission for all the items that you buy, including the essay. All right, let me see here. Okay. This is what it says about new money coming into the state, right? And this is Cantillon describing what it is that he was seeing as far as an economic force. Like, a lot of people say, oh man, none of that stuff makes any sense anymore because that was a billion years ago. And it was just like, okay, well, you go ahead and discredit, right? You just go ahead and dismiss it and believe that it's not real, or that the underlying economic forces that he was recognizing are stuff that you can't change. Like, this is going to be there forever. Right? And you can find that the current environment has new technical aspects to it that make it and distort it and change it. Going from horses and wagons to cell phones and airplanes, there's a huge difference inside of it, but it doesn't mean the underlying economic forces aren't still there. Goes on like this. Now, if the increase of money in the state comes from the abundance or comes from the balance of foreign trade, i.e., sending abroad articles and manufactured goods for a greater value and a quantity than it is imported and consequently receives a surplus of money. So basically producing and selling all the great products to the world and the world sending you their money, right? When you get an abundance of money doing this. This annual increase in money will enrich the great number of merchants and entrepreneurs in the state and will give employment to numerous artisans and workmen who provided the goods sent to the foreigner from whom money is drawn. This will gradually increase consumption of these industrious inhabitants and will raise the price of land and labor. But, right, here's the key to it. But the industrious people who are eager to acquire property, right? Because this is separated, right, by this. The industrious people who are eager to acquire property will not at first increase their expenditures. They won't spend the money, right? They're going to cut back on all their expenses. They're driving a 97 Ford, or if 99 Ford and a 97 Suburban, right? This is what they're doing. They're cutting back on their expenses in order to become property owners. Right? They cut back on those expenses, or they don't dive into them. They will not at first increase their expenditures. They will wait until they have accumulated a large sum from which that they can draw a secure interest income. They will take their money and they will deploy it into ways that then gives a return on their capital investment. This is what some of the industrious people will do. Just some, not all, just some. Independent, this income is independent of their occupation. So now recognizing that, Cantillon recognized this a long time ago, that there was going to be groups of people out there who didn't go out there and enjoy the luxurious experience of having the new money. They at first held back on increasing their expenditures so that they could accumulate a large sum to get a secure rate of interest on that money beyond that of their occupation. They all of a sudden stepped themselves up. Everybody else out there was working and blasting that money and having a good time, driving pickup trucks and wearing new clothing, right? I mean, obviously they didn't have pickup trucks back then, but you know what I'm saying. All these people, they suffered the consequences while other people held back on their expenditures so that they could get this secured rate of interest on their income, meaning that they saved it and deployed it to a return. Right? This is how they were able to separate themselves. They were thriving. Everybody else is surviving. In fact, he goes into the people who are surviving. Let me go and find that one. Here, hold on one second. When the abundant money raises products to honest prices, the inhabitants eagerly work to acquire them. That's us. We're eagerly working to acquire these things. Right? However, right, it goes in there. Let's see, eagerly work to acquire them, although they do not, like he's not talking some, he's talking like the majority, although they do not show the same eagerness to acquire food and merchandise beyond what is needed for their maintenance. Right? Most people work to maintain themselves and then they don't work any more than that. They start complaining that there is no situation out there that gives them a better life. But really, they're not working beyond that provides them food and maintenance. That's as much as they'll ever work. And this has been the case for hundreds of years. Cantillon describes it hundreds of years ago, and it's still the case today for both of these. There are people out there who are cutting back on their expenses so that they could put that money towards a secure return on their income, beyond their income. Other people are taking and borrowing money to buy a luxurious car and then have to work extra hard to pay back for the interest and debt and everything else that they're doing with this car, but it doesn't provide them with anything of benefit. It never will return capital back to them. There is no return on investment on that. Which one are you going to do? You're going to survive or thrive? People say, man, I want to survive in this world with a nice car and a nice bank and not have to work all day and not have to suffer through all these things. And you're just an asshole for trying to say that that's the way it has to be. Okay, so be it. That's me, man. I mean, I'm just going to tell you that's the way it is, and that's the way it is. Like, if you don't want it to be that way, maybe go listen to somebody else who can give you some wishful, hopeful dreams that it can be something that it's not. You know? And you can be convinced by that. Moving on. Living frugal from 20 to 30 will set you up for life. Yeah, and this is what I find very interesting. I was talking with a bunch of people, and what I find very interesting is that many times in life, and I don't know what it is, but throughout your 20s, you kind of stumble along, it's no big deal, but then you get into 30s and you really screw it up. And I tell you, it was more times I have found lately when I brought this up to people that they were at their worst or needed help from their parents the most when they were in their 30s. Isn't that weird? Like, I've heard that a lot from people. Like, when they were in their 30s, they had screwed it up so bad, that's when they needed the most help. Like, whether they got in the most debt, they got the most trouble, the most addiction, the most whatever, it was in their 30s, right? That's when they needed, like, the help the most. And so I'm thinking, man, you're right. If you could set yourself up throughout your 20s so that by the time you get into your 30s, you're not stressed, you're not trying to figure it out, you're not stumbling, you're not like you did all that while you're in your 20s. Like, screwing up in your 20s is great. It's the time that you want to screw up, but you don't necessarily want to be screwing up in your 30s, and you certainly don't want to be doing it in your 40s, right? By the time you're 40 years old, if you're still screwing up like I was, like, that's like your last ditch effort to try and do it, right? Because by the time you get to 50, 60 years old, you're just not going to have enough time to really, build up. I mean, you have plenty of time to start a business and run that business into something magnificent. Don't get me wrong. That would be your last opportunity. But taking advantage of like compounding interest when you're 20 years old as opposed to when you're 65 years old, it's not, you're not playing the same game anymore, I mean, that's not the same thing. So, understanding that's the case. Screw up in your 20s, try lots of stuff, invest in lots of things, do lots of businesses, meet lots of people, do whatever it is you got to do within, your 20s so that by the time you're 30, you have done screwed up enough, right? And I tell you, if it's addiction that you're suffering through at your 30s, you're probably that's probably going to end up holding you back. And that's probably going to be the big thing. I don't know how else to describe it. That's what I've noticed. That's what I've seen out there. That's what I believe. So yes, absolutely. In your 20s is, from the time you turn 20 till the time you're 29 years old, try as much stuff as you possibly can. Because I can tell you, at 30 years old, I didn't, like, broke as hell, no money, no bank account. Like, it doesn't really matter. Like, if you screw up and spend all your money and do, try investments and businesses and all that other stuff, and it screws up, no big deal. Like, it really isn't. You got plenty of time, yeah. But by the time you're 30, you want to have that stuff out of you. Because if you're screwing up in your 30s, it's gonna be a lot harder. So do it young, do it early, get it out of the way, and better yet, just take the advice of many people who are on this channel right here who are commenting. If you happen to be young and you're watching this, listen to some of these guys, right? I mean, these people had gone through a lot of effort to get to the position that they are in today, and a lot of them are now figuring out what it is that they had done in their life to now try and change what it is that they are doing, because the people who have already done it, like, they have advice that they could give that is definitely good perspective, but it's the people who are doing it right now, today, in today's economy. These are the people who are not listening to those who say you can't. Right? I mean, if and to believe that you can't do it in today's environment is absolutely incorrect, right? Anybody can make it in today's environment. You can make it as well in today's environment, and you can do it just by seeing that there's other people out there and believing that it's possible, right? So many people out there say it's not possible, and I look and I'm like, well, what about those guys? And it was like, oh, okay, well, set those guys aside, and maybe it's, but then it's impossible. I was just like, well, you can't say that, It's just like, there's people out there who are doing it right now, right? Understanding what it is that's going on is the best way to figure out what it is that you need to do. Knowing that we are not in the same situation that we were in a decade ago, and especially not what we were in, 50 years ago. We are in a whole new place. But this new place isn't bad. It's just something that you have to figure out. You have to, know that it's not going to be the way that your granddaddy did it. It's going to be something totally different, totally new, and it's going to take something that's totally, unique to you. And most of that is just understanding what it is that's happening out here. Knowing that the monetary policy is not what it is that people assume it is in the mainstream media. And since most of the time this is where the information comes from, it gets regurgitated over and over again as if it's fact when it's not. It's just simply not. Recognizing that to be the case and internalizing the information for yourself from the actual source and not from, filtered through mainstream media is going to give you a much better advantage over the other people who are sitting around believing nonsense. I mean, literal nonsense. All right, guys, I think this is coming to an end. I want to thank everybody for being here today. We are an hour and 10 minutes into it with 226 likes, 226 people with 110 likes. Thank you so much for hitting that like button. Put my glasses on here. We got Wayne. The sooner you figure out the grass is the greenest where you care for it, the better it gets and the earlier it comes. Yeah, absolutely, Wayne. I mean, and this is the thing that I've kind of figured out that, as I study the economy and I hang out with a lot of people and learning a lot more, understanding the economy from your own perspective, from your own view. That's the only way to go about it. Like we can take in information from other people that is really good stuff, but they're viewing it from a different location. Like it's like literally like looking down on the view from two different mountainsides or something. It's just like it's not the same view. And knowing that to be the case, that it's not wrong. Nothing is wrong with anything that the way anybody is viewing it, but it is the meaning that you give behind it that can be completely different. Excuse me. And I think that's probably like the key to a lot of this is just really giving it the appropriate meaning behind it all. We can both read the same article and one person can relate it to how it is that it's damaging you, and the other person can relate it to how it is that they use the information to better themselves. And it's the same information that they're receiving, but it's really depending on the meaning that they are giving it. This psychological difference that happens really is all up to you to figure out. Like if you are the person who is feeling like everything is hard, everything is bad, everything is difficult, the world is going to make it, it's right around the corner from destruction, you are going to look for the evidence of that. And really, this is an ego thing fighting for survival, right? It's trying to feel safe. It's trying to figure out where all the dangers are so it can protect itself from these dangers. And so it's in a constant state of survival, a constant state of fight or flight, and it's a constant state of negative emotion. And for the most part, you will find it very difficult to make partnerships, to start businesses, to invest, to get into the flow of money, because you're always in this very standoffish, very confrontational, very difficult mode of operation, which is really not going to end up benefiting you in any kind of real way. Now, don't get me wrong, if the big one did come, right, which I know you're very hopeful for when you believe in this stuff, you'll probably do pretty good because you have at least thought about the situation and what it is that you're going to be doing with it. However, every single day that goes by that the failure doesn't exist, your investment into failure is really just deteriorating your life and not giving you any kind of benefit. And the people who are not investing into that failure are actually putting themselves on the other side of the wedge and watching you, fall into the abyss. So think about it in that fashion sometimes. It's nothing wrong with being a survivalist or a prepper or even a conspiracy theorist, but don't let it run your life, and certainly don't let it stop you from advancing your life in the current environment because you believe that the whole world is about ready to end tomorrow. If that's your feelings and that's the case that you have internalized, you're going to find it difficult. See, the problem with it is here, let me go a little bit deeper into that, because what ends up happening is that we all carry an energy within us. And now this cup of coffee has energy. The trees that are outside my window have energy. The song that the bird is singing has energy, right? So all this energy that is around you, you are attractive or like you are repelling this energy that is around you based on the feelings and thoughts and behaviors that you are carrying within inside. Now, it's a subconscious thing that is occurring within it, but ultimately that's the energy that you carry. What that reflects to the external out there is that positive negative. Okay, so now let's think about this in a survival mode. If you are in a survival, what would you be if you were like in the middle of the woods being chased by a, you know, damn bobcat or something, right? You're out there and you're trying to run away from this little critter that's about ready to attack you. What are you going to do? You're going to be like, fight or flight. You're going to about ready to like, smash the hell out of this thing if it gets near you, or you're going to run away from it. But anywhere, all the feelings and energy that you are carrying has all been pushed to your extremities because this is the fight or flight energy, right? And this is the negative emotion. Like, oh, I'm going to kill it, as soon as I see it. Or I got to run away from it because I'm scared as hell. One way or the other, it's that negative emotion that you are feeling that has put you into that state. Now, that survival state that you are in, this is repelling to the positive things that you are looking for. Like, you want connections, you want money, you want business, you want all this stuff, but you're in a survival mode. Like, how is that gonna, like, think about it. If you were in a survival mode and you're trying to make a business deal and you're, is that like, you think that that's gonna work? Or if you're like in a thriving mode where you're like, dude, let's get this project done. All right, so what's the first step that we need to do in order to make things happen? Like, which one of those energies do you think is gonna be more responsive? Right? The one that says, we need to get this job done now. Or the one that says, man, I think this is the greatest team that we have ever put together so far, to date. Which energy is going to be the one that's going to be attractive and the one that's going to actually be useful and helpful and be productive in this world? Right? So understand that. Understand that is the simplicity of how it is that you can attract anything in this world. If you have this survival mode, like it's distance, it's hard, it's difficult, it's not, it's, everything out there is being pushed against me and all this other stuff, you are in survival mode, which is, trying to protect yourself, trying, that kind of thing. You internalize it differently, right? You internalize it where it says, man, things aren't difficult. Everything is in abundance. There is nothing out there that I can't get. If I was to just put my mind to it and start putting the bricks together, I could build just about anything I want. When you have this sort of mentality towards things and you're not in the survival mode of, trying to figure out what it is that you need to do to protect yourself from every little corner of threat that comes from every direction out there, and you're not feeling that, then the energy that you're putting out there is a very attractive energy that says, hey man, I'm in abundance. I want other people to be in abundance. I want to work on projects that has people like happy and encouraged and feeling like, what we're doing is useful and helpful. And these are the things that I want to be in the moment of. And I truly want to feel that. Like, I'm not doing it for manipulative reasons to try and gain from it. I'm doing it because that's just my natural character now. Right? And I'm not one who's stuck in survival, but I'm in one that's stuck in, abundance and happy outcomes and just moving forward and just trying to be useful and helpful in this world and chasing that excellence. You will find that the return over time becomes very abundant, right? It's just everywhere you look, it's just nothing but opportunities and options. But it's literally just on how you're feeling and thinking about it. That's it. That's it. It's really it. It doesn't come down to anything else. Like, I can sit in this truck and be pissed off about things and talk about how pissed off I am about it and get probably a lot of attention because people are attracted to that in a way, feeling that emotion, that negative, hated emotion. They like feeling it for the minute. But in the end, I don't really get anything from it except for maybe I could get some short-term monetary gain, right? By getting the attention from it and getting some ad revenue or something like that. But that's it. Like, and then it's over. So outside of entertainment purposes, I don't know what it is that comes from that. But if I'm putting out ideas on how it is that you can think and feel better about where it is that you are in this world so that you can actually be in the flow of abundance that can make you very attractive to the things that you need in your life, I mean, that's that's the energy that I want to be in. That's the energy that I want to talk about. I don't want to talk about and feel failure and misery and pain that exists out there in the world and talk about that so everybody else can have this emotional feeling about it and then get some monetary gain off of it. It's like, I don't know, like, if that's my purpose, right? That doesn't feel like my purpose in this world. All right. Your own personal economy can be totally separate from all intents and purposes. Yeah. I have 4 children, making it is the goal. My economy relies on things breaking. Yeah, that's funny, isn't it? Some people do. Some people's economy relies on things breaking, like a mechanic or something of that nature. That's funny. I was watching a video of a guy who was kind of going through like an old scrapyard, junkyard, wrecking yard. And he was just like like everything in this wrecking yard, he just saw as potential for existence again. And apparently this is what he grew up in. Like if he wanted, to have anything in his life, if he wanted a car, if he wanted a bike, if he wanted anything, he had to go to the wrecking yard and find one and then make it work again because he was never going to be able to afford anything. And so when he's walking through this wrecking yard, all he sees is this nothing but potential. Like I love that. Like everybody else is like, oh man, how do we get rid of all this garbage? And all he sees is just nothing but like options and possibilities. Like, isn't that cool? Like, that's like the mentality difference that people need to carry as far as their energy. I don't know about necessarily a junkyard, but the things in their life that they are looking at, right? I mean, this guy looks at nothing. It's just like, oh my God, this is like heaven. And other people are going, man, what a waste of land. Right? All about the meaning you give it. Hey, what's happening, Matthew? All right. Well, guys, I'm going to have to call it quits. I got a big chore ahead of me. We got that turkey that Fred raised, and today's the day. Today's the day that, we finally process her and get her up into the freezer. That's the other goal, not goal, other skills to have that I think a lot of people need to take. Maybe it is a goal for some people. Maybe they should internalize it as a goal, but to learn to process food, like raising this turkey and being able to process it, whether we, cut it up and freeze it in parts or whole or can it. I think Sarah already has a plan for it. And my job, I have one job. That my job is, I got a difficult job. That's my job. But, understanding the ability to provide for yourself in this fashion, like obviously you're going to have to rely on some infrastructure for things, but being able to raise animals, raise a garden, be able to forage for food, can that, preserve that food, that stuff like that. Not only is it just an excellent hobby, just for fun, just straight up, it's an enjoyable thing to do with the family. It's also probably one of the greatest survival skills you could have, right? So when you're in this thought of surviving and thriving, having this skill, the ability to perform a raising of whether it's animal or vegetables or the harvesting, foraging for these particular things, and then be able to preserve it, like that's an awesome survival skill that is rooted in like positive energy. Think about it. You're not doing this to try and like, in case of failure, you're doing this because it's wholesome. Right? I mean, that's what's cool about it. And so like these are the type of things that I think more people should be giving meaning to. Instead of like trying to say, oh man, we need to do this because of the New World Order coming after us. We need to do this because it's fun, it's appropriate, it's a good skill, and it can be useful in the future if things were ever to get bad. Right? And when you put it into a meaning or into that sort of context, then you actually feel pretty good about the outcome of your life, right? You're looking at the pantry and you're thinking, man, that was a lot of hard work. I feel good about my hard work. I feel good about where we are. I feel good about all this other stuff. There's nothing but good feelings that come from it. I gotta go butcher a turkey. Uneducated economist. You guys let me know.